In yesterday's episode, we explored what it meant to be a conscious creator and how you can use astrology to live your life on purpose. Today, we're going to explore the inner planets and how they play a role in you understanding how you're expressing your consciousness. It's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. You have to know a little bit about astrology for this to make sense. And at the same time, the astrology doesn't make sense unless you understand a little bit of yourself. So you get to learn about you and astrology all at the same time here at the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Now, here's the deal. I am super excited about these daily doses of useful information. My Capricorn third house is very, very pleased because knowledge isn't power unless you know how to use it. And I think using astrology to put a label on yourself and stick you into fate and determinism is one of the biggest wastes of one of the most amazing tools we human beings have developed for ourselves. The planets don't do anything to or for you, and to work with them means you're really working with yourself. We're going to explore the planets and how we describe them in progressive evolutionary astrology. Then part of progressive evolutionary astrology is understanding how to use what you've got, play to your strengths, and understand that the power is in the noticing and the perfection is the correction. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to go through the planets and what they mean. And then each episode for the rest of the week, we're going to go a little more in depth on those planets. These are things I've covered in the Planet of the Month Club in the past in the Awake Space. And you can find those in the Planet of the Month Club library. I think they're available for individual purpose. Sometimes I'm really bad about putting price tags on things. But if you're in the astrology crew and you're listening to this, make sure you go and check out the library because there's a wealth of information. I talk about how to use that energy there and explore the different layers of consciousness through the planets, the signs, and understanding the houses. Alrighty, let's get moving. Get your tea, get your coffee, get your matcha, get your H2O, get your Red Bull, because whether we're walking the dog or cuddling the kitten, taking the kids to school, doing paperwork, whatever we're doing, driving to work, we're going to do it together and get perfect parking. All right, just to do a refresh, and you can go back and listen to yesterday's episode if you missed it. We talked about the different layers of consciousness. So we had an instinctive layer, the instinctual layer where we're in fight or flight or freeze or fawn. It's really making sure that we're protecting our vulnerability. The old way of describing this consciousness when we were developing it back in the mid 2000s was the self-protective, when we're, afraid or angry or feel the need to self-defend. Our relational or our social cultural programming consciousness is our default program. We've all been indoctrinated by society. We were trained through our families, school, media, social, TV, songs, our culture. And that's our default programming. And there's nothing wrong in operating in any of these when it benefits us. But when we do it without thinking, we just kind of stay in a rut. We just stay in a pattern. So that's why we want to learn how to be more deliberate. I used to call deliberate consciousness transcendent because we were transcending social cultural programming. But people took that to mean enlightenment, like better than somebody else. And that's not the point of this. Being deliberate means aligning with your purpose, aligning your mind, your heart, your body into a direction that serves your purposes better. It isn't necessarily about being more moral. Okay, there are people who can align in to their purpose or their aim or their will who do things maybe listeners of this podcast wouldn't approve of. So it's more about being an on purpose person. And you can choose which morality you want to tune into. So I want to talk to you about how the inner planets work with you and how they express and how you can notice what's happening by paying attention to your body, your reactions, your responses. So, we're just going to run through this. Get your notebook. You're driving. Don't get your notebook while you're driving. You can pause. Okay. You can look at the timestamps. All right. You can come back to this. So, first of all, we want to look at the inner planets as a team. A lot of times when astrology is being taught, like we're parts of a machine, like they're independent parts instead of a very fluid communication structure. So, the sun is our spark of life. It's our energy levels, our physical energy levels, whether you're energized or you're depleted. And then also our personal will. You can think of it as willpower, but it's our personal will, our will to live. And sometimes that is strong and sometimes not as much in every single person's life because we have peaks and troughs of experiences, right? Our moon is our lens of the day to day experience, it's our feeling, sensing nature. Okay, just like a baby learns about the world by putting everything in its mouth or feeling things with its fingers, we never lose that aspect of ourselves. It's just we refine it, we mature it, we maybe get a little more sophisticated with it. It is our feeling, sensing nature. It works in tandem with Mercury and the sun. So the sun is the center of our solar system. Mercury comes up next because Mercury is the closest. And again, I wrote about how I came to these conclusions as a young astrologer, arguing the astronomy side of astrology because they're not divorced as subjects. They just don't always live together. Sometimes they go on separate vacations. So the sun is the center. It's our spark of life. Without our sun, we are extinguished, right? Then we have Mercury. Mercury it's really fascinating because my theory, I believe, got proved last year when astrophysicists talked about Mercury not having a stationary orbit, meaning it spins, it rotates on its axis. And it does it because it borrows energy from Venus. And I have said for 30 years, the sun, Mercury, and Venus work together. They still have separate expressions. The sun is our energy levels. Mercury is how we perceive and transmit information. We could do that visually through sound, speech, movement, like interpretive dance, photography, putting our hand in mud and putting it on a wall. All of that is both perceived and expressed. Okay. Mercury is how we signal to the sun. Maybe we're overstimulated and the sun is like, oh, I'm a little depleted. Then Mercury tells Venus, hey, we need to rest. And Venus then talks to the moon. We'll get to that in a minute. Venus is our magnetic energy that helps us attract what we need to fuel our sun, right? But through social cultural programming, that magnetic force could be repelling versus attracting. So think of all the people who've been taught that it's virtuous to be poor. Because if you don't have enough resources, you get to heaven in the afterlife a lot faster than a rich person. Now, I'm not making excuses for billionaires. I don't think we need to have billionaires. That's a whole nother thing. That's another show. However, the thought process of it's better morally and better for our afterlife to not have resources is a cultural program that teaches our Venus to say, no, I wouldn't want to be comfortable in this lifetime. Okay. So she signals also to Mercury and the sun. Our Venus has preferences, right, that help fuel our sun. One of the ways we notice those preferences is, yes, with our Mercury in observation, with our seeing and our hearing and looking for that information. But our moon, as I mentioned, the moon is our lens of experience. Maybe you get hangry when you're hungry. It's not just, oh, I realize I have a hunger signal in my brain. It could be like, I'm really cranky and crabby and I'm going to bite somebody's head off. Oh, wait, I'm hungry, right? That might be the signal. And then Venus is like, well, I prefer the roast beef. So these guys work all together. We teach it separately because it's hard to teach it as a moving system, but I've decided to try. And we're going to do it here on the podcast, deeper rooted level in the Patreon. And again, if you are in the astrology crew, you could check out the Planet of the Month Club library, because I do break down the separate pieces, but show how they work together there. So any planet can express through any layer of consciousness. And human beings are experiencing a range of expression every single day. Nobody is consistent, okay? Unless you totally live by yourself and have zero irritations, all right? And then you're cheating. We can have an instinctual reaction. Maybe you overhear somebody saying something, it reminds you of the past. You've held on to a resentment or a wound, and then all of a sudden you're feeling vulnerable. The moon is going to be like, "Oh, I'm vulnerable, and you're going to like maybe lean into your Venus a little bit. I feel depleted. I'm not getting what I need. I'm not getting what I want." Your Mercury goes, "Danger, danger, danger, Will Robinson." And then Mars says, "Fuck that shit. We're out. We're either escaping, running away, freezing, or fighting." Maybe like, "Did you just say that? Did you just say that? Because somebody told me that one time and now I have to fight with you," when you're triggered. So Mars does the action that the Sun, Mercury, and Venus need to help that moon not be off kilter. I told you, it all works together. Is it making sense? Let me know in the comments. And again, if you want to watch this video with the subtitles, just go to patreon.com/the awake space. It's a public post. You can comment there. So there's a flow of energy, and the planets are symbolic of how the mechanics of that flow works. This sounds really abstract right now, but this is exactly the understanding you need to make the most out of like my Healing the Money Wound class using astrology, or my Living by Luna process where you learn your own rhythms for life, or my Finding Your Side Gig using astrology, or creating businesses using astrology, marketing using astrology. You can do anything using astrology, but you got to know how your own internal system works. So I'm going to simplify this. So we've got sensing, action, evaluation, interpretation, experience of energy, and then the next move comes up. All right. So it's continuous and fluid. It isn't just one thing happening in a chain reaction. It's kind of like everything all at once, all of the time. We are multi-dimensional beings. It's a lot easier to digest life when we look at it as, time is a one-dimensional vector and we only have the present moment. We're moving towards the future. The past is done. But we know that time is kind of simultaneous. And so are we. So when we learn how to work with the subtlety of our nature, and you don't have to be a genius to do it, I promise, I'm going to teach you some physical tricks to tune into your body, especially in this week's patron-only episode on recognizing where you're at and maybe how to do a little shift. If you're in the mystery school, you're already gained these tools through the curriculum and exercises in the Discord. All right. So let's find out why it matters to look at the planets in this way and understand it more like at the quantum level, where everything is moving in frequencies and alignment. Traditional interpretation in astrology kind of puts you in a box. And if you deviate from the box, there's something wrong with you, right? I know I had that experience when I was reading interpretations by kind of famous astrologers. I'd be like, but I don't operate that way. What's wrong with me? I don't do that. Well, I do think differently than a lot of people in my society, right? I never behaved in the same way. I wasn't into the same pop culture things. I wasn't into sports. I wasn't into most popular music. There was a period, of course, as a teenager. I never felt like I belonged or fit in. I knew I was different. I fit into a small niche of academic, nerdy people, and I was okay with that. So the generalized interpretations didn't really fit. There was nothing wrong. But also this idea that you were a really lucky person or an unlucky person, I never bought that because people would tell me how lucky I was. And I knew what was going on behind the scenes in my life. And I'd be like, "Whew, if you only knew." What I knew is I made things happen for myself because that was my way out. I created opportunity. I was good at seeing it and taking advantage of it. Yes, sometimes a little luck was involved. Most times it was always being on the lookout for something that would help me get to the next space. So I understood really, really young that this destined thing, this chosen one, this idea of to be either doomed to be the failure or the success or any of that was kind of crap. That's why I studied all the things I studied moving forward. So when we're looking at you using this approach, then you've got astrology as a practical tool for helping you become a more deliberate person where you're living life and life isn't just happening to you. It doesn't mean the nasty politicians won't exist. It doesn't mean there won't be bad things that happen. It doesn't mean there won't be bad rainstorms or. But what it will do is it will give you the ability to navigate these very changing times. It doesn't mean you won't be stressed out, but you'll be stressed out for shorter amounts of time. You'll be able to course correct to put yourself in the best possible position. One of the things you're going to learn as we go along with this series is we're going to learn how to observe our sun, our energy levels. A lot of times when I teach this, people get confused. Like, what do you mean my energy levels? And I'm like, have you ever woken up tired? Have you ever been up 24 hours and you didn't do any drugs, but you're still wired and you don't know why? That's what I'm talking about. Learning how to observe your day to day, what your baseline is, to understand when you're fatigued, when your energy is depleted, and you'll be amazed at what does it and what energizes it, and how you can actually treat it like a dynamo and build some energy up when you need to do it. You want to notice your impulses and your reactivity. You can actually move off the default setting. People say, well, I can't help it. I always get mad when that happens. Well, you can help it. You have to choose to help it and you have to know what to do to help it. But you're never stuck with a certain reaction unless you have a very unique mental makeup. And then we want to be able to look at what's happening with our Venus. So are we pushing things away? Are we missing opportunities? Or are we really in alignment with our desire nature? And by desire nature, I'm not talking about being attached to stuff. I'm not saying, oh, you get every Louis Vuitton you want. We kind of use consumerism as a way to replace what we actually need, which is our feeling of connection, the feeling of being held, being in relationship with other people in healthy and meaningful ways. So being able to check in with what we're magnetizing to us and is that really what we want? That's important in being deliberate in creating our lives. And then using Mercury to quickly reframe. If you have negative self-talk and you call yourself dummy, 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 or you think, oh man, that was rude. Why did I say that? You'd be like, well, I can't think of everything right away, or I didn't mean to misspeak. I didn't mean to use that word or that language. I will make note and maybe I can ask that person if there's a better way to say what I wanted to say. Again, instead of being mean to yourself, being like, oh, I know how to learn and I know how to change and I can do that. You want to keep things more productive. Notice I'm not saying being overly positive, but if you're your worst critic, right? When you speak to yourself that way, you're doing yourself intrinsic damage. Good news is you can heal that, okay, using those same noticings and practices. And again, we're going to talk about this in a lot more depth in the Patreon, but I wanted to introduce the concept, and we're going to be going through the planets here on the Awake Space Astrology podcast using astrology. When you use this methodology and these understandings, it allows you to move from reaction to deliberate choices. You're living life as on purpose as you possibly can in any given moment. Again, that doesn't mean you won't react. I still do reactions. I developed this. I still have moments where I'm cranky and I'm angry and I'm hangry and I didn't get enough sleep. probably not going to be as deliberate as the days I get adequate rest and my tummy is full and maybe haven't drunk too much coffee. Those are probably days that are going to go a little better. But I can still notice when my energy is low and go, I need a little more energy. What can I do to energize myself a little bit more? Not too much, but just enough to achieve what I need to achieve today. And when you line it up and you're operating with your Mars in alignment, then you're not having to push and struggle and you can just move on about your day. So, being able to make deliberate choices, creating aligned action and abundant attraction, and to utilize your energy in ways that makes life a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable, a lot more comfortable, and a lot more meaningful. All right, we're going to do a practical exercise in the next segment. I think I need to have a little break and maybe refill my own cup. I think this time with tea. All right. We're just going to pay attention to our sun. We'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow when we start diving into the inner planets themselves, of course, starting with the sun, our personal dynamo. If you're driving, you might want to wait till you're parked, okay? And you will get perfect parking. So, first of all, pause and scan your current energy levels. How do you feel? Are you, like, and I don't just mean like mentally or the reflexive, oh, I'm tired, everything's happening. No. Actually, how does energy in your body feel? Take a breath and you're like, well, I'm kind of awake. I'm reasonably, I'm not at my most energized, but I don't feel that depleted. Now, on the other hand, you might be like, every cell in my body is tired. Every cell. Okay, fair enough. It's vitality or depletion. Energy. Do you have the energy to do something? It's not just about having an awake mind, but like in your body. There's times your mind can be really awake, but your body's really tired. I don't know. My mind is going. It doesn't mean like anxious thoughts, but just, maybe you could sit and write, but you couldn't take a mile walk or something like that. So you want to observe and scan your personal energy and notice, are you energized or are you depleted? If you're in the mystery school, you might recognize this because we do an exercise like this. So then when you think about doing a task, something you really want to do, like maybe you really want to bake cookies, think about it. Does it energize you or deplete you? Are you doing it out of obligation or are you doing it because you really want to make the frickin' cookies? Feel that energy. Don't operate for things like in your work, you kind of have to. They pay your salary. And if you haven't learned how to align yourself, this is probably not a good place to practice it. Okay. But think about it at home. Maybe it's your day off. And are you making cookies because you want to make cookies or because people are bugging you to make cookies and it's just easier to get them off your back and you make the cookies? Which one feels which way? Is there a tension pattern going on? Not the talk going on in your head. Just feel your body. Does your body feel like, ugh, fine, I'll do it? Or do you feel like, oh yeah, okay, I like cookies, right? How do you feel about it? All right. Once you understand how you're sensing in the body, your sun, okay, then you ask the question, well, what do I want to do with this? Where to next? What do I do with it? All right. Now, every single sun is going to express a little differently depending on the sign and the house placement. And again, that is in the Planet of the Month Club library. If you are in the astrology crew, you get automatic access to that. I do believe the sun video is available for purchase as well. These are long lectures, they're very visual. I break it down, explain the history of the astrology there, as well as give progressive evolutionary astrological interpretations as well. So you get a full education on it. What's one small deliberate thing you can do with this understanding? Like if you notice that something energizes you, and let's say it's your day off or you have time after work, sometimes we think, ugh, and we know the thing's going to energize, like, I don't want to go to the gym. We have a little resistance pattern. But if you feel into it, You're like, well, I'm only really resistant to having to go into the locker room. Once I get out of the locker room and I get on the machines, I'm okay. Feel into the okayness feeling to bolster the energy. Does that make sense? I hope so. Let me know in the comments because, again, this is going to be daily. I'm super excited. All right. So, our next episode, we're going to be diving into the sun and talking about your energy with the sun and understanding a little bit deeper with that and how it works with Mercury. Okay. That's super fun. And then patrons, don't forget your 1 hour companion is going to dive into mapping your inner planetary system and practicing how to kind of like be in charge of your own energy so that you can, have more rewarding relationships, have better communications, be in better employment, or do better as an entrepreneur or a creative out in the world so that you can do life on purpose, whether it's having better family relationships or having a better relationship with money or whatever it is, whatever your goals are. This framework will help you achieve the things that matter most to you. I'm your cosmic coach, Laurie Rivers, and I want to thank you for joining me here at the Awake Space Astrology podcast for your daily dose of how to use your astrology. If you're not sure about how to understand your astrology chart, check out the show notes so that you can take advantage of my free YouTube playlist called Beginning Astrology Tutorials. I walk you through everything from understanding the symbols in very visual, very short, very digestible videos to your introduction to your natal chart, understanding your future Saturn return, introduction to interceptions, why they're not bad, and a couple of other videos, I think on elements, etc. But anyway, these are things that can get you started. Being a progressive evolutionary astrologer doesn't mean we don't use proper astrological technique. There's a difference to refreshing interpretations and seeing the system as a framework and a tool for self-development and self-actualization, but we didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's still astrology. All right, I'm Laurie Rivers. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to watch this video, head over to the Patreon.